Hi friends, it's Shanna Cramer here from Creatively Uncorked. Today's painting is going to be Violet Spring, an oldie but goodie out of the Creatively Uncorked library. It's getting to be about springtime now. It's April after all, so I want to do something shiny and bright and happy and warm and thinking about spring. The brushes I'll be using today, I'm definitely going to be using my big fuzzy old beat up bristle brush. These brushes are just absolutely perfect for this type of a painting, for getting all this detail. So hang on to your old brushes, they're always going to have a purpose. And then I have my flat filbert. And my filbert's slightly beat up, but I think it's going to work just fine. This is going to work really well for doing my water texture for any of my smooth lines and for the tree trunks. Paints today, I'll be using a phthalo blue green shade, and you should, if you're looking at this on either YouTube or Patreon, you should see links to these paints. I'll have everything there available for you. So I have a phthalo blue, dioxazine purple. And if you're not using our supplies, just get something close. It's fine. White. A little bit of yellow. And in this case, my yellow is yellow medium azo. Again, I'll link to it. You don't have to memorize this. And then phthalo green. All right, so as I'm starting, I'm not going to start out with a sketch. No need to sketch this. I'm just going to go ahead and start in with my dark colors and work on my background. So taking my big bristle brush, go ahead and give that a swish in the water. Just about any time we're using acrylic paint, we're going to want to start by dipping our brush in the water. And I will go ahead and just add in my horizon line. It's just above the halfway point, roughly. Okay, and then I'll start working my way up into the sky. A lot of white, closer to the horizon, and I'll start working into a darker blue as I work my way up. One thing you'll want to do to keep from being a paint flinger is when you get to the edge of your canvas, don't run your brush right off the canvas. Instead, start off the canvas and go on as much as you possibly can. When you take your brush and run off the canvas, then you end up flinging paint, which is definitely not going to go on your canvas and might go someplace a whole lot worse. So here we are blending the paint. I have my darkest blue up at the top of the canvas. I'm working on a 9x12 canvas today. I'll just keep it a nice small canvas for a nice quick painting. And then just blend all the way down to the horizon. So from the horizon line down, I'm going to do the opposite. I'll have a little bit lighter and then fading into dark. So again, starting at my horizon line with my lighter blue. And even if you do cover up your horizon, as long as you can still figure out where it's at later, you're good. Just getting darker and darker and darker as I work my way down toward the bottom. And this one I'm getting darker a little more quickly than I did at the top. If you're painting your edges, you can go ahead and just wrap your painting right around the canvas. So as you're painting blue, just also paint down the sides. Just make sure that you do it after you paint the front. You want to make sure that the front of your canvas is painted first, and you want to make sure that your paint is all blended together while the paint is still wet. And if you take your time to paint the sides and you take long enough that your sides dry or that your front dries, you're taking too long. So if you paint a little more slowly, that's nothing wrong with that. But you might want to just save painting your sides until later. Or do like I do and just skip that part. Okay, so there's my background. At this point, you'll want to stop, let it dry. I'll just blow dry mine quickly. Okay, background is nice and dry. Next area, I'll want to come in with my midground. You always work from the background to the foreground in your paintings, and the background is going to be my sky. My water in midground is going to be this hill off in the distance, and then we'll start working on our trees. So my hill off in the distance is going to be a little bit of blue, a little bit of purple. I've run out of blue, so I'll just go ahead and add some more. Just another little drop. It's pretty good paint, so you really don't need that much, just a drop at a time. Add more as you need it. So just taking that little bit of blue, and let's see, my horizon line right about there. Oh, that was my purple. That's okay. This will actually work just fine. So now when I get to my horizon, I also have this reflection right below it. So if I just start blending down just gently, now it's going to appear to be a reflection. Up at the top, that's a hill, so I'll want to leave that a little bit more solid. And I've got my purple in there now, so I'll just go ahead and add a touch of blue. I stack my paints upside down so I can just quickly see the colors and grab them, but if you can see what's happening here, this is purple actually, dioxazine purple, looks black. It's a very dark color. Until you get it on the canvas or until you mix it with white, and then you can definitely tell it's purple. So I'm picking up a little bit of blue and just tapping that on my plate so I get that texture. And I'm going to add a touch of white to that. So now I'm starting to get some of this texture. And this is just kind of hills off in the distance, trees off in the distance that are kind of faded a little bit into the background. Atmospheric perspective is what you call that, when the trees off in the distance kind of have this blue cast. They're sort of faded back. Ours are a little more purpley than bluey today. That's just fine. It's called Violet Spring after all, so. So then again, just gently blending that color down into the water. Color reflects color, especially when you're dealing with water. So whatever color you're working with, just blend a little bit of that down into your lake. Okay, so I'm going to just rinse my brush here. So I was debating on if I wanted to switch to a smaller fuzzy brush or not. I think I might do that just for this area in here where I've got my grasses. But this is a much smaller canvas than the original painting. The original painting was done on a 16 by 20. And this is a 9 by 12. So you just have to adjust everything down when you adjust your canvas to a smaller size. So I'll come in here. Well, let's see. I think I'm going to need to paint that white first. Or add some white to my paint. Little drop of white. This green, this is phthalo green, and then my yellow. All yellows are transparent. I'm dabbing this in my paper towel just to soak up that water. So if you want to make your colors opaque enough to show over the background, you have to add white. Either white or black, but in this case I want to keep my color alive, so I'll just go with white. Okay, and phthalo green mixed with any yellow is just, especially this bright, vibrant yellow, it's just going to make a beautiful spring green. Just bright, bright, bright spring green. Another bright spring green that you can get would be with turquoise and yellow, but we're not using turquoise in this painting, so phthalo green works just fine. And then have another little hill over on my right side. Make sure I get enough white in there. Little yellow, little green, to get my bright, bright, bold spring green. And if you can't tell because I'm holding the brush kind of at it directly onto the canvas, but I'm just tapping with the edges of the bristles, just tapping with the end of the brush right onto the canvas. And that's just going to make it a nice textury look. A little bit more green in there. Spring it up a little bit. All right, and then I'll stick that brush back in the water for a little bit. Switch back to my bigger brush. drying that off because I have that same technique that I want to try down in my lower left-hand corner where I have that bush that sits right in the front. So that bush is going to be, I'll put some blue over here about my green. You can see how the shading of it is dark. So the background of it is dark, if you can tell. And then it gets green, and then the highlight is going to be yellow and white. So I want to do my background first, so that's where my blues come in. If you have too much water on your brush, try to just hold that on your towel for a second to soak up some of that extra water. If just holding that on your towel is going to soak up only the water and leave the paint on your bristles where you want it. So I'm just kind of doing this big sort of green, spring green bush right down in the front. Just the background of it, just the shadow colors. And that's just giving it a definition and a shape. Then I go on to pick up my greens. And I'm just tapping my greens in that same spot where I was mixing my greens for the background. So it should still have a little bit of white, should have still a little bit of yellow. Maybe we want a little bit more yellow. Let's brighten that up a bit. And let's see if we have enough white in there. Can we brighten it up with some white? You know, that's not so bad. I like that. That's a good mid-tone green. That's looking pretty good. So you'll want to just tap kind of straight on. Maybe another drop of white. There. So I'm getting a little bit of texture in there this time. Just tapping with my bristles, the big bristle brush. There. And this is getting a nice little variation in color just because I had some more white on some areas than others. Don't fill in the whole thing. You want your shadow color to show through. So I'm just wiping off the excess paint on the paper towel and then picking up some white and yellow. So this white and yellow, just what I had there, a little bit of green on my brush, so it's going to just kind of green down the color. That's fine. It'll read through as highlight, green, yellow. Although I might want another drop of white. Let's just brighten this up a little bit. There we are. That's nice and bright. It's just tapping on some highlights in a few areas. Kind of want these to be a little bit similar color, although the ones in the background should be just a little more faded, a little more gently. What do we do when we hit the water? Slight reflection. I'm just gently dragging the brush just right under where my ground is, and that's going to be just my water reflection. Just a little tiny bit, and only right under where my greens are. Tap some texture back in, and that is good. So we're going to leave that alone. So my bushes down in the front could probably have a little more highlight. Highlight's not really sticking now because the paint's wet, so I can come back and add more of that later. Some things that I can do now would be, I can add a little bit of my dark shadowy colors in here. I could do that now, or I could wait until the end. So I think at this point I'll take my second break and I'll blow dry it again. And then when I come back from blow drying, we'll add the purple trees, purple leaves. Okay, so now I'm looking pretty good. I'm ready for my purple. So I've got my dioxazine purple, and let's just check to make sure which one is the purple. In the future, I might actually write these down, but for now, see, look at that. It looks black until you touch it with water, and then it looks purple. Over here, we've got the blue. Okay, so it looks very similar, and then green, of course. All very, very dark colors, dark transparent colors. But they're going to make themselves really known as soon as you add a little bit of white or a little bit of water to them. So I think I've got enough colors out there. I will add another pile of white, and I'm only adding a small amount of white at a time so that I can move it around. So when I had my white over here, I mixed it with blue, had it over there, mixed it with yellow. So I'm just adding some over here now so I can mix it with my purple. Back to my big bristle brush, if you can see that. Big bristle brush. Going back to my towel, drying it off. Okay. So I'm not using exactly the same shades of purple that I was using the first time around. Different paints. So I think I might want to just maybe, let me check this out. I might maybe want to add a touch of magenta. So I'll just put a dot of magenta over here. Again, I'll just post these colors in the links for you. But in the meantime, I'll keep right on filling in my background purple. So that one, I'm just dabbing it in. So it's a similar technique to what we did down here, where you put in your background color, which is going to be a little bit darker, like we did the dark blue down here. Now I'm doing purple up in the top, and just add some variation, some big trees, some little trees. I'll come almost all the way down to the bottom, not quite. And not all the way across, because what was the point of putting those hills in the background if we don't let them show? So that's pretty good for a background, right? We're only going to let a little bit of it show through. Okay, now I want to move on to my magenta. So a little bit of magenta. That's a nice bright color. More white. Let's just power that color up. Powerful bright pink. So it won't be quite as bright as this. This was a neon color to begin with, but this is a photo of a neon color. So the painting itself is, let's just say 5.5 years old now, somewhere around there. And if you look at the original, it's, even though it has a clear coat on it, a protective clear coat, it still has lost its color. So that's one thing that's going to happen with pinks, purples, especially neon colors. They're all going to lose their color. So if you want to keep the color of your painting true, or as true as possible, then clear coat it. Well, that's one thing you can do with a UV, some sort of a UV varnish. And then another thing you can do is to not use bright pinks and purples. Never use neon paints. If you want it to show up, don't use neon paints. Years ago, many years ago, I used to work at a racetrack and a NASCAR track. And one of the drivers there, he was just bragging up and down that he had neon colors on his numbers and nobody else did. And I'm thinking, okay, so? And I'm like, yeah, right. You talk about it like it's a big deal. What does it actually mean? You have neon colors, so what? And he says you can't keep neon colors. The colors stay bright for 2 races and then they fade. He said nobody else could get their colors to stay true, and that's why nobody else had neon numbers. Okay, fine. Big shot. What do you do? How do you do it? How do you make your colors last? Well, I still don't know if this is true because I've never tested it, and this was, a lot of years ago. And he said that he mixed olive oil with his paint before spraying it on the car. Well, I don't know that numbers on race cars are even done in paint anymore. I think everything's done now with vinyl. So wouldn't even apply today anyway, but I still want to try olive oil and paint just to see if it changes how long the color lasts. I kind of feel like he was just telling me stories, but I haven't tested. Okay, so now I've got my purple flowers. Taking some of that paint off. Okay, mushing my dabs there. Make sure okay, good to go. So now I just have my water reflections. And this is a mostly dry brush. Just a little bit of paint left on the brush. I'm just dragging it across the water. The only thing you need to really remember here with the water reflections, horizontal strokes. Horizontal strokes only. I see this in the studio happens where people will try to make rainbow strokes. They'll be moving from the elbow. Don't move from the elbow. You paint your brush strokes from the shoulder, always. That's how you keep your brush strokes horizontal. Add some brights in there. That's not so bad. Maybe a little bit brighter. Some of those brighter pinky colors. Magentas, I mean. Technically, we'll be technical, we'll call it magenta. Okay, so that is looking mighty nice and springy. Brush goes back in the water. I'll switch back to my little filbert brush. The filbert is the one that I'm going to have the most control with. So at this point, I'm down to my last details. I've got the tree trunks. I've got this little dark area, shadowy area and below the trees, right along the shoreline. I can clean up my shoreline. And then reflections of those tree branches. Nice and simple. I'll just take my purple, a little bit of blue, and I'll use these colors pretty pure, like no white. And let's see, and these are all kind of growing up from, oh, more purple, more purple. Okay, so growing up, kind of leaning out over the water. So I'm just using the side of my brush. Lead with the skinny edge. And I'm stopping to wipe off the paint after just about every brush stroke. And that's because my purple is still wet. If my purple was not, if my trees were dry, I wouldn't have to. I could just paint over it however I wanted to. And it wouldn't affect any of the underlying colors. But I'm not waiting for the underlying colors to dry. I'm just going right on ahead. And you're only going to have a few of these branches show. Maybe these are lilacs, or maybe there's, well, probably not lilacs, but whatever kind of spring bushes we have going on here. Okay, so I think we've got enough branches in there. So with this purpley blue on my brush, I'll kind of come in here and just clean up the bottom edge. And this is just my shoreline. I kind of want to make sure that's dark enough and defined enough. So I'm just scribbling in some purple in there, purple and blue. Again, a little more purple, a little more blue. Really, the only color that I'm not adding in here is green out of my darks. So I'm just scribbling gently right along the edge of my grass. Anywhere that's along the edge of a shoreline, you kind of have to separate your ground from your water a little bit. And this is just one way to do that. Just gonna go right along the edge. There. I'll switch back to my smallest brush momentarily. Dry it off when you take it out of the water. Just gonna take a small, tiny bit of this purple and blue. So that kind of had a lot of water in it. So I'm just gonna dab on my paper towel, dry it. If you start with a drier brush in the first place, you probably don't have to stop and dry your bristles on your towel. Whoop, a little too much water. So then just a gentle, just pulling out a little bit of color from that edge. Just a little. There. So now I've got my really defined edges. Any other last touch-ups we want to make before we quit? I think maybe I can do a little bit. I'll clean out my brush, sticking with that medium-size bristle brush. And I think I can maybe add a couple of highlights in here. So if I do a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. Another just, oops. Well, that's fine. I'll just take that little bit of white, mix it with a little bit of yellow. Apparently a little bit of pink. Just dab it right on the top. And maybe I'll come down here with that nice bright yellowy white. Just dab a couple of highlights in that foreground bush. And that, all right. I see one last little detail. So now I've got this watery purple blue. And I'll kind of handle some of my reflections in here. So just a little bit. Now I don't want to be too exact and too detailed. I just want to give the impression that my trees are reflecting. All right, I think that is starting to have the look And it's not necessarily the look that you're going for, it's the feel, the overall feel. So if you're looking at it and you can go, yeah, that is definitely some nice water reflections there, then you're done. You've accomplished your goal. And that looks like I've accomplished my goal. I've still got a little bit of the green reflection. I've got my edging, got my trees, and I think it's looking like spring. So here we are, Violet Spring with Creatively Uncorked. I will include links below for your different paint colors. I'll include descriptions for your brushes, but there's no pre-sketch, so there won't be any other downloads available. Thank you for watching.